This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today became known as the Value Whisperer, from the way she guides business owners to think differently about how they own, communicate, and sell their true value. She had to first conquer some challenging personal and professional obstacles. From building a six-figure business abroad while raising a family with little support, to shredding her label as, air quotes, the shy girl, to become known for her confident networking and inspiring public speaking. She is an inspirational example of how life's challenges can push us to discover, embrace, and live into our true value. Today, she is a multi-award-winning business and mindset coach who has helped hundreds of women believe in their true value and confidently build their dream business and lifestyle through her Dream Client Blueprint. Her thought leadership has been featured in many of the top business media titles, and she regularly speaks to audiences around the world, as well as coaching speakers at TEDx events in Switzerland and the UK. She is the host of the popular podcast, The Art of Value Whispering, and is the best-selling author of A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking, the first in a series of inspiring titles for introverted business owners. Known for her quiet power, breadth of business and marketing knowledge, and ability to uplift, inspire, and educate, she provides memorable talks that leave your audience ready to take positive action towards their personal and business goals. Please welcome founder Melitta Campbell. Welcome to the show, Melitta.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
Oh my goodness. I got your intake form last week. I was prepping a little bit, and to be honest, I thought I was having you on the show last week. So I was preparing for you last week, and I went, wait a second, I'm not interviewing her, and I had to scrap it. But when I read your bio the first time, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I'm going to have this TEDx author, podcaster on. This is so cool. So it is such a privilege to have you on here, joining me on my podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel I have a lot to live up to now.
You've already done it. That's right. The hard work is done. You wrote the book. You did all the talking. So now it's just us learning from all of this. So why don't we take a step back here? You have this beautiful, beautiful story here of all these different accomplishments that you've done. I love the Value Whisperer. I love the Shy Girl. Take us back to that Shy Girl. Take us back to where she lived, because for most of my listeners, most of you who are listening right now, you live in the States. You live probably in New York somewhere, or in the Hudson Valley, or across the country in California or somewhere. But Melitta is joining us from the Swiss Alps, and she has a very unique story. And I'd love if you could just paint a picture as to your upbringing.
Yeah, so I grew up in a little town, well, it's not so little, called Swansea, which is on the south coast of Wales. So a lot of people don't know this, but in the UK you have England, and then you have Wales, which is the kind of bumpy bit on the side. And it's a different country with a different language. We speak English mostly, but there's also the Welsh language. And it was just such a wonderful place to grow up. And I'm so grateful we grew up in a time where we didn't have social media and phones and all of this tech that we have. But I had a very outdoors life, and being an introvert, I was very into my animals and horses, and it was just the perfect life, just going out. The Gower Peninsula where I live, it's a nature reserve, and it has been for about 100 years or so. So it's not built up at all, and you can just ride all day down to the beaches. And yeah, it was idyllic, really. Um, but very easy to hide, being someone who's quite shy. And so I found that part of me was very confident with the animals and the horses and one on one, but in a group, I was quite happy to hang back and let other people take the lead and decide things for me. But then that became a habit that I kept for way too long. But yeah, it was a happy childhood.
So you enjoyed the animals, and you would see them and you would play with them, but you were very shy. How did they serve you in the sense of being able to help you kind of break out of this shy state?
Um, Partly I don't think they did because I just hung out with the animals, and but I did a lot of competing. So I won a lot of competitions with my horse, and so that kind of got me out of my shell a little bit because just simple things like having to go to the registration desk and speak to someone and say, I want to compete, things like that. I used to burn out up and feel really awkward doing these simple things, but I had to do it because I really wanted to compete. And sometimes I wanted to not ride alone. So I had to go and speak to other people and ask them, hey, do you want to go on a ride together? And everyone was always like, "Oh yes, of course," and it seemed so natural once you actually had the courage to ask. But it took me a lot of courage to ask these simple things. So,
Mm.
um, but I think it was, yeah, they didn't necessarily help with the shyness necessarily. Probably just, yeah, helped me, but it helped me, I think, see the connection and different ways of communication. So communication became a massive part of my career and still is. And I went to an art school. I did a business degree at art school where you learned about communication through visual media and different ways of looking at how do you get a message across? How do you appeal to right people? How do you create an experience that people remember? And so I think the animals kind of did that same thing because the way you create a connection with an animal is very instinctive, particularly with horses. So yeah, I haven't really thought about it before, but that's probably one thing that it did really help me do was have that deeper connection and appreciation. Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And in terms of being a shy, introverted person, how do you identify that as a kid? Because sometimes being shy and introverted means that you're quiet, and people, I think, probably miss qualify or what am I trying to say here? I think judge quiet people differently. And so there's some overcoming there. And I think you're kind of catching on to what I'm saying here is, so I'm interested in how did you identify yourself as an introvert, and how did you overcome some of the judgment that you might have received by being so quiet and shy?
Yeah, I think I'm not sure I was so aware of being judged as a child or a teenager. I just went along with everyone else's ideas. And as a teenager, I think they were like, great that someone else is just following along with my crazy ideas. That's brilliant. Um, but looking back, if I was to do my time again, I would definitely be a bit more discerning what I said yes to. Sometimes you don't, as a teenager, like, yeah. And then you realize afterwards, oh no, that wasn't a good that wasn't a good idea at all. Um, but going into my career, being more introverted, uh, there you did have the judgment. And being introverted and a woman, and at the time I had blonde hair as well, which probably didn't help with the whole thing. But there were certain people who would you were just underestimated the whole time. No one really expected you to do anything good. But I kind of used that to my advantage because then it's really easy to over deliver and outperform everything. So and then you gain the respect and the credibility. And um I worked for one company and it was a oil and gas company with a shipping consultancy attached to it. And so the people running the shipping consultancy were captains. They were all ex-captains who were very used to running their own ship. They say this, you do it. Um, but I wasn't really like that. So I remember one guy came and said, "Oh, can you type this fax?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't type." And he went straight into the CEO's office and was like, "Why have we employed a girl that can't type?" And so the CEO called me into his office, and I'd been in this role about a week, possibly two, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to be fired already. But I went into the CEO's office, and he was like, "Oh, John Lloyd says you won't type a fax." So I said, "Well, yeah, I don't type, and I didn't think that was my role here because I was head of marketing and branding." And he said, "Right, I see. Come closer." So I took a step closer and I thought, oh, I was so nervous. And he held out his hand, shook my hand, and said, "I never make the coffee either." So it was a really nice signal to me and to like this other guy that yeah, that wasn't my position there, and I could stand up for myself, and actually it was very appreciated. So um there I've been really lucky to have in every single role some really powerful mentors like my CEO in that position that have to help me to ignore these other people. And my father as well, he was very encouraging. He worked in IT, ran a huge organization, and he always told me that, "Yeah, I don't know why, but when you get into an office, so many people will think you can't do things and tell you you can't do them just because you're a woman. And I want you to know right now that's nonsense. Don't believe anything they say. That's really a reflection on their own insecurities. You do what you want to do, and people will support you." And he's been so right.
Mhm.
So yeah.
That's very intuitive of your dad. What did he do?
He was the IT director for the bank's automated clearing system in the UK. So the story that actually prompted him to say that was we were walking down a corridor when I was in his office one day, and this really tall guy got down on his knees and he was talking to me because I was probably about 7 or 8 at the time. And then we went to my dad's office, and he was saying, "No, in those moments where you get to an office and men tell you you can't do things, just remember the guy that signs the banknotes got on his knees to talk to you."
Wow, that's a really, really good story. I really like
Yeah.
that. I like, yeah, that's a really great way to paint a picture of that. So, I asked that question because it's funny. My wife, I'm obviously extroverted, starting a podcast and being on all these different media channels here. My wife is introverted. And I know that as an introvert, she'd been judged for many years by friends and all the rest because by being quiet, people make assumptions of you. And by being introverted, you're also not trying to dispel those assumptions. You just go, "Oh, okay, that's what they think," and so you're very quiet. And my daughter is also very quiet. She just turned 9 years old. And so I am very interested on how, as a young person, you're able to try to, overcome some of that challenge, because as we go further in life, and what you just described in some of your story there is that one of the judgments that are made about introverted or quiet people is that they're not passionate. And the truth is that passion doesn't, just because I express it through my words and through being an extrovert, doesn't mean that you're any less passionate than I am about something. It's how we express it. And you express it in different ways, and you've gone on to be a speaker and overcome your shyness, but you also express it through writing. And obviously a really great writer, and writing your book, A Shy Girl's, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front, the Shy Girl's Guide to Networking. And I'd love if you could share a little bit more about that book with us.
Yeah, sure. So when I grew up in Wales. I moved to London after art school, and I got a job in marketing, but then I moved to Switzerland 20 years ago. And when I moved, I realized one, everything in Switzerland is done through networking, whether you want to find clients, a new career, everything is done. Networking is a really big way of life here. And I didn't know anyone. So I had to learn to go out and network and meet people. Otherwise, I'd have no friends, no career, no prospects, no anything. Um, and it was just terrifying. So I started reading loads and loads of books about networking, but the sort of common theme, there was lots of good advice, but there was this common theme that if you're a bit shy and introverted, just get over yourself. It's like, well, that wasn't very helpful. And I would go to these events, and on the way there, I was just telling myself all the ways I was going to mess up, why it was going to be so awful, how bad I was going to feel. And then on the way home, I would remind myself of all the silly things I said, and well, that person must think you're a right idiot. And so, with hindsight, I really was doing all the wrong things, the complete opposite of what I should have been doing to help give myself that confidence. And I would go to a networking event and really force myself to stay beyond my energy level as well, because I didn't really understand back then, that introversion is more to do with how you think and how you manage your energy, particularly in social situations. So I was exhausted on top of everything else.
Mm.
Then I started to shadow another lady who was an extrovert. She was amazing at networking. And I thought, maybe if I could just go with her, I can learn how she does things. But after 2 or 3 events with her, it became really clear that that's just not my style. She would network she'd be in one circle, leaning backwards, chatting to someone else while waving to someone. I was like, oh my gosh, that's just not me at all. So I had to find my own way. Then by luck, I was on a leadership training program, and we were encouraged to do some self coaching and take a problem that we have. And so I picked on networking, and we had to figure out how could we do it. And this has really helped me to see break down why it wasn't working for me, how I felt, and how I wanted to feel, and what skills could I bring to this? How could my personality actually be an advantage for me? And I developed what became in the book the victory formula, which is stands for vision, intention, courage, and confidence, because the two kind of go together. True self, rules, and yes, just remind yourself you can do this. I think I've covered all the letters. Um, so I really created my own rules of engagement, really. So I reminded myself of how I want to show up, how I wanted to be remembered, really the personal brand, like we would call it now, and then created the rules that made it okay for me to network my way. And it works. I started to get known for my network, and I was known for being one of the most connected people in the region. And I was asked to speak about my experience and share my advice. And then people were quite surprised when I stood up and my presentation was a shy girl's guide to networking. And they're like, but you're not shy. So it was really interesting. And then, of course, most people that come to those kind of events are people that are shy and struggling with networking. So it really resonated with them. And then that's when I decided to write the book to share all of that advice further, because all of the books that I was reading, as I say, they had great advice, but no one tackled this first part, the mindset that you're just really terrified and don't want to do it. And there's so much holding you back that you have to think differently. Or I think it's really helpful too. So I was really keen to share that victory formula, and it's been wonderful. It's been picked up by so many people since then. I'm still invited to speak on that topic. So yeah, it's always fun.
I would love if you could share a little bit about the networking piece here. And I want to get to the speaking as well. But just going to the networking, because you said in Switzerland, it's all about networking. And I'm very curious on what you mean by that, because obviously stateside in the United States here, networking's big. We have our chambers of commerce. I'm a part of that, business associations. And networking is one of the ways of which we're successful in business. But I wouldn't say that it's the only way. I would think that, going out and meeting new people in different ways, and we'll call it cold calling, where we're knocking on doors, is one of the ways. Is it that in Switzerland that's frowned upon? Cold calling, going into places without any type of introduction, is something that people don't do at all? Or does it happen and it's just that networking is just a better means of it all?
I think cold calling and cold outreach, it does happen, but it's here in Europe, in continental Europe. I think in the UK it's different, but certainly in Switzerland, it's a much more reserved society,
Mm.
and they like to take their time to get to know people.
Mm.
And when they do, their allegiances are really loyal. And so if you go networking, people like you, they will bring you clients, they will refer people. You don't have to ask them. So I remember working with an American coach, and he was saying, go to your network and tell them what clients are you going to bring me? It's like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could ask that here. They were just like, who do you think you are? Do this properly. We be friends first. We take some time. We drink wine together, and then this follows. So it's a bit of a longer process. But as I say, once it's definitely worth the effort, because once people know you, then they will absolutely 100% support you, and that's kind of just how they do things. But if you want to get a job, you can't. There aren't really recruitment agencies or anything. It's all done through networking. So there are some jobs that are publicized, but most of the time they've already gone to someone that someone met through networking. So yeah, there's lots of networks and just contacts and meeting people at lunch and that kind of thing. Not so much in the evening. A lot of that's for the family. Weekends and the evenings are family, but in the lunches are a big networking opportunity as well.
I'm glad you specified that, because I agree with you 100%, and it might be because of my European background to some extent, but myself and I think there's a bigger movement because I know several other people that are like me in the networking scene here in New York, in that for us it's about relationship building more than it is about the sale. Because we believe in what you just said, which is if I build a relationship with you, whether or not you're a good prospect for me, it's who you know as well when we're building the relationship and who you might want to refer to me. And I think it's also like what you just said there is, if I tell you to refer to me, you're more than likely going to be turned off by me. Whereas if I build a relationship with you and build value and show you just through our natural relationship, my capabilities, my expertise, when someone needs what I offer, you'll be more inclined to say, hey, you know what? You should reach out to Michael about that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they've taken time to get to know you, when they do refer you, it's not just a kind of, Michael does something like that. They'll really showcase your expertise and their belief in you. So these referrals become really powerful. So often, when you go networking, I think a lot of people think, oh, I need to get clients. But, I think that's really the wrong way to think about it. You want to think about coffee. Who do I want to meet again for coffee and start building this relationship with? Because I had a sales lady on my podcast who called these people of interest, but you don't know in which way they're interesting till you get to know them. And I really like that way of thinking about it, that you go for coffee, you get to know them, and maybe they're interesting because they'll become a client. Maybe they're interesting because they'll become a friend. Maybe they'll become someone who'll become a real powerful advocate. You don't know until you have those conversations. But to see people with a dollar sign on their head, you can really feel those kind of people straight away, and you kind of avoid them. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And yeah, just in line with what you just said, it's when I go networking, when I go to events, I'm looking to either build on the relationships that I already have, so seeing the same people again and having good conversations with them and learning new things about them, or to your point, meeting new people for a new relationship. And I'm an ambassador for my Chamber of Commerce. And so that means that I meet the new chamber members first. And I always tell them exactly what you just said, which is when you go to the networking events, bring your business cards. We still do things the American way here, which I don't think will go away. And I think is fine for our culture because it's accepted. Do that. But really your main goal is who can you 2-3 people have lunch or coffee with after. And that's what I tell them is the goal is not to get the sale, but to get the coffee. So I believe in what you're talking about. Speaking of what you're talking about, you're an introvert, you're a shy girl, and you're doing this project to try to unravel your shyness and your introvertness. And here comes this book, and the next thing you know, you're thrusted on stage. Share with us a little bit about that experience of going on stage and sharing about your book and your networking, and what that was like. What were some of the processes that you had to do in order to overcome some of your shyness to get on stage and talk to this audience about this?
So the public speaking actually came first. So one thing that I did, and this was the nice thing about this victory formula, is it got me thinking about, well, who do I want to who do I want to be? What are my values? What do I stand for? What in a meeting, because I was at a level where I was in meetings with other senior managers, and they some of them just talk nonsense, and I was like, I'm just really not bothered about that kind of thing. Um, so I was like, I need to be the champion for my team. I need to build our credibility. I need us to be known for this is what we're all about. And these things, forget it, we're not bothered about that at all. So I just picked three things that I was going to stand up for and speak up for, that were all important to me and my team, and the direction we wanted to go to and the impact we wanted to have. So in the meetings, I started to really be a bit more forceful with these three areas that I wanted us to be known for. And I very quickly built my credibility. And then I think I got like three promotions within 12 months. And at the time, I was working in private banking and in Geneva, which is very male dominated to be, yeah, is an understatement almost. And so to be a woman who didn't speak French because it was a French speaking area and didn't know anything about banking. In fact, I'm dyscalculic. I can't read numbers. And so, and then to build my credibility to a point where I was getting repeatedly promoted, and I ended up reporting directly to the CEO. I wanted to use that as an opportunity to inspire more women, because I'd realized that we have this understanding or this belief that as women, often around a table in a meeting, we'll say something and everyone ignores it. Then the guy at the end of the table says exactly what we just said, and everyone's like, oh, brilliant idea. But I realized once I started standing up for myself, that that wasn't the case. I just realized I wasn't being bold in the way I presented myself before. And as soon as I was bold, people were listening to me. But then with the promotion, I started a women's network to help inspire more women in the bank to be bold, to own their own value, and to really take the career in the direction that they wanted, knowing that, if I can get to this position, everyone else in the company has got way more chance. Because, as I say, I didn't have a clue about banking. I worked in marketing communications, so I used that. It was purposeful because I wanted to make sure that in all our client communications, we were being really clear to someone that didn't have an insider knowledge of banking. So it wasn't that I was really, it was a strategic move. But I started this women's network, but then I realized, oh, if I'm going to lead this network, I'm going to have to present and speak. And I could present a decent message. As I say, I worked in marketing and communications, but I'd been to some of these events and conferences where, there's always one speaker that everybody is just like, wow, that was amazing. And I wanted to be able to speak like that. And so I found Toastmasters. So I went along to Toastmasters. But I know you're into Toastmasters, and you're probably aware that when people come, they maybe take a week or two before they start speaking, but then they'll do their icebreaker and they're into it. I took 6 months before I had the courage to speak. I kept being timekeeper, so nobody noticed I wasn't actually participating.
Oh, we notice.
And it was quite a big group. So yeah, I managed to fly under the radar. And I was like, oh no, I'm working on my talk. I'll put myself forward soon. But yeah, I really didn't. But even in that time, just hearing other people's talks and their feedback, as an introvert, there's one thing we're really good at is reflecting and listening and learning just by watching and being in that room. So the way I presented was already improving, and people were asking me for advice before I'd even started to speak. So I was like, wow, there's really something in this. And as soon as I started speaking, of course, then that learning curve just like shot up, and I really got very, not to say very good, but a lot better very quickly. And in a corporate environment, it's not that difficult to stand out as being a decent speaker because normally I asked when I started speaking, I asked one of my colleagues to sit in the meeting and to say, "Oh, could you give me some feedback?" And the feedback was, "Well, nobody fell asleep. I think that was really good." So, you don't really have a very high bar, but I set myself a high bar. And so I was starting to speak. I was presenting a little bit in French as well. And what I loved about going to Toastmasters and learning to speak was it was pushing me outside my comfort zone. It was helping me build my confidence and become a little bit less shy because I could now structure my thoughts more clearly. I could tell stories that really got my point across in a way that had more impact and lasted more than anything else. So I was learning all of these skills. So when I was known for my network, because the two kind of things went hand in hand, and I was asked to speak. By that point, I was quite comfortable. Of course, standing on stage with a proper audience is a little bit different, but it didn't feel quite so nerve-wracking. In fact, I was really happy to be sharing something that was so personal to me. It made a big difference, and I started to see the difference it was making for other people as well.
Yeah, and that's what I love about Toastmasters. What you just described there too is the space that it provides. To do a role for 6 months before actually speaking. I always say that it's a welcoming, supportive environment. It's a safe environment to where you go along at your own pace. Public speaking is daunting for anyone, even myself as an extrovert, as somebody who does this very regularly, who's a past president of my Toastmasters club and still attends weekly and still performs weekly. It's never quite easy. I mean, there is an ease to it as you are in a familiar group. It's like when I stand in front of my Toastmasters, it's pretty simple to get up there and speak. But once you're speaking, you're on and you have to perform. And so I always think that when I meet a new member or somebody who's a guest, that it's really important to support them in their journey and let them know that when you're ready is when you come up to speak, and to never force them, because I feel that if you force somebody into public speaking, then they're only going to get more scared and turn away from it. Whereas what you did for yourself by taking on a small role like timer or grammarian, or those little roles that don't take up too much, but give you enough responsibility to where you have to go up and speak, I think is a great way to just dip your toes in the water and get more accustomed and acclimated to it. So one, I commend you for doing it. And two, I commend your club for allowing you and giving you the time. And I'm a big advocate of Toastmasters. I think it's what gets a lot of people out of their shell, because everybody has a story to tell, and everybody should be able to have the tools, the skills, and the comfort to be able to share their story, whether it's on a big stage or just with a friend. I think is so vital. So I think that's really cool. And I'm glad you got to share that. So of course, you did that, and now share. You got your book, you're networking, you're on stages, you're talking, and then you're a TEDx. You start doing TEDx and start becoming a coach in there. Tell us about the journey in TEDx.
It was interesting. I mean, it's very much like being a Toastmasters evaluator and mentor, so which I've been doing for a long time. So it felt like the next kind of progression for that. And I'd love to give a TEDx talk myself as well. So I wanted to get to know, with introverts, it's the novelty often that makes us feel drained. So by understanding how it works from the inside and behind the scenes, I thought, well, that's going to help me feel more comfortable when I'm ready to take that next step. So it really did a lot there. But it was interesting because at TEDx, what was different, of course, Toastmasters, people are going on this journey and they're learning to speak. Whereas a lot of the people that I was coaching at TEDx were already celebrities. There were people from TV and radio, people that were extremely accomplished leaders and very used to the stage. But then the TEDx talk is a little bit different because you have to give this gift, and often the gift comes from your story. You have to build that credibility. So, for example, one lady that I worked with, she was a newsreader, but she wasn't used to being telling her story and being really personal. So that for her was really difficult. But the nice thing is they pick up really quickly. So I was really with the TEDx events that I was involved in, everybody has one or two coaches who complement what they're missing. So my expertise was more around the storytelling and content, not necessarily the delivery. But a lot of people have that fear of sharing their personal story. And I say, it's not your personal story. It's not your story. It's your audience's story. So you being open and honest about your experience, they're going to see their story in what you've done, and it's going to give them the courage to go forward and do things differently or think differently or get behind a cause. So it was really wonderful to see people then open up and have that courage and then get really vulnerable sometimes in sharing their story and what that's been like for them. And then when they present it and you see the audience, because you're sat in the audience and seeing and feeling how they're feeling, it's like, yeah, it was quite magical because yeah, the talks are just on another level to Toastmasters as well. So yeah, I love it.
Well, I talk about it all the time on my podcast, and maybe when this one airs, I will have done it already. But that's one of my goals as well, is to be a TEDx speaker and to have a talk. And you're 100% right. The style of TED and the style of TEDx speakers is so different than what we see in other forums. And it is very vulnerable, it's very story driven, and it leaves an impact. The audience always walks away with something tangible, something that they're inspired to do. And it's just really cool. And I think that's why people like yourself, like myself, who want to create an impact, want to be TEDx speakers. It's like, it's what better stage, to have set for ourselves. Part of what you do too is you're known as the value whisperer. And it's where you help female entrepreneurs find their true value. Tell us a little bit more about the Value Whisperer.
Yeah, so I think this is something that has been present my entire life, but I hadn't really noticed it. And so I had go back to when I was 25 and I had my dream job. But the company went into receivership. So I was working in PR, which I was loving. And then I was out of job all of a sudden. And so, but it took me 6 months to get a new job. And I went for so many interviews. And with my last £5, I bought a train ticket to get to this last interview. I thought, right, this is it. This is the job I'm going to get. It was for the British government, part of their communication pool. And we had to submit a strategy in advance. We had to do all of these tests. We had to do so many different things. And I thought, great, I've cruised through this. Just the interview left to go. This is going to be easy. And I think it was 10 minutes in, I got thrown out. The lead interviewer, there was a panel of 5 people, but she just like, get out, take this CV with you. And I was like, oh, I thought it was part of the interview, because I know the British government or any kind of political environment is quite tough. People aren't always nice. So I thought, oh, maybe it's part of the test. And she's like, no, I just cannot stand any more of your lies. Get out. I was like, but what? Sorry, why would you think I was lying? I've only been telling the truth. And then she dropped the bombshell and she said, all the way through, I'd been saying, well, we did this and we did that. So she assumed that I'd been passing someone else's work off as my own. And in fact, I was saying, we did this, we did that, because I thought that was what being a team player was all about. And so I realized that I hadn't, I'd only worked in small companies. I was the only one doing what I was telling her about, but I hadn't stolen anyone else's credit, but I hadn't given myself credit for what I did. I hadn't owned my value. I hadn't presented that clearly. And so the next interview I had, I spent a whole day going through like why I came up with ideas a certain way, why I was like, no one else could have quite done it the way I did, what I learned from my mistakes, how I engaged with people, everything. And then I got the phone call before I even got home to say I got the job. And on the first day, they're like, that was the most mind-blowing interview we've ever had. And it just really made me see that we need to really take time to understand our value. And there's a lot to that. It's our values, which I started to speak about when I was in private banking, that how I would present myself. But also your unique perspectives on things and why you approach something a little bit differently than perhaps someone else would have, and to really own and step into that. So that was the beginning. And once I made that connection, I became really passionate about telling everybody, no, you have to own your value. Don't say that. You catch people when they're saying, putting themselves down, or I just did this little thing. And so I was really became a big advocate for embracing your value and communicating it. It was a big part of the work I did at the women's network I started. And then I became a mum and I had to leave the office because there just wasn't childcare here. So I started my own business. And I started as a communication consultant. I was working for large companies. It was easy because I had the network by that point, and I was known for communication in this region, which is really small. So that was kind of the easy career. But I started to burn out of that because I was working with these large companies, working on their visibility, their communications and strategies. And I didn't really believe a lot of what they were saying because oh, we want to tell everyone this, but then you see them acting in a very different way. So I thought, I don't really feel comfortable being the one putting out what felt like propaganda. And so I started to look for something different. And when I was networking, I just kept hearing all these business owners saying these things that I've become so sensitive to. Oh, what do you do? Well, I just do this little thing, or, it's like, then they'd explain and you realize, well, that's not a little thing. That's awesome. They really weren't communicating their value. And I started to see people really talented, and I think everyone that starts a business, they really want to help people. They want to make a difference, but they're not necessarily good at communicating that. And when I worked in the bank, I used to coach leaders in their communication. And I realized that no one's taught this stuff. No one's taught how to communicate clearly, unless they go to Toastmasters, of course. um, no one's taught how to stand up and say, I'm awesome at this, or to say it in a way that's not doesn't feel braggy, doesn't feel icky and uncomfortable, but how to really engage people in your value and what your business does, but in a nice, natural, and engaging way. And that's what I felt that I could really contribute something special to, because it brought everything that I've been doing to date together. So that's what I did. I changed my business, became the Value Whisperer, and that was 7 years ago now. And it's felt so different as a business. Every time I'm come to my business, I just see more opportunities to help people, and I'm always excited about the next step. So yeah, I'm really excited. Even though it's 7 years in now, I still feel I'm just at the beginning because there's so far I'd like to take this idea.
Yeah, I love how you articulated that in terms of, your story of developing your own practice, of being able to figure out what you're good at, and then sharing that with others. You're 100% right. And we do see it in Toastmasters. I like that you kind of like threw the shout out there to Toastmasters, where people don't realize their self-talk, what they're saying to themselves in terms of the negative self-talk. And then they also don't realize their accomplishments and what they've overcome and their stories. And we see that with TED Talks, like you were just saying earlier, is that when someone really starts looking at themselves and their story and what they've overcome, the challenges that they overcome, and then the jobs that they're doing or the business that they're creating and the impact that they're trying to create, how big it is and how significant it is, they don't give themselves enough credit. And so I think it's so important, the work that you do in terms of being the value whisperer, of whispering in someone's ear and letting them know how great they are. I think if we had more people believe in themselves, if we had more people who went around and really believed that the work they're doing is impactful and really believed that they are great themselves, we would see so much less negativity. I'll just keep it at that in the world, because so much, I think, of the negativity that we see, or so much of the bad business that we see, is because people are just passing on their own self-limiting beliefs onto others. And so if we could eliminate that, I think we would have a better world. And I know that you're on a mission to do that. I'm going to shift gears a little. Oh, go ahead, please. Go ahead, jump on that.
I was going to say, there was a talk that I heard probably about 10 years ago now by a lady called Dr. Josephine Gross, and she talked about the sacred commerce, which was the origins of trade in Egypt, because you had all these kind of towns and or tribes or whatever they were called at that time. But they're like, oh, they've got the blue dye. Let's go and like kill them all and get it. So it was a really rough place to be. But then the temples came in and the priests and priestesses came and saw trade as a way to maintain peace. And but not just maintain peace, but for people to really give their highest contribution, to live into their value and to create a better world together. And it worked. People were really in alignment with their true purpose. And that was, their business was seen as the way that they could bring that out into the world. And but then the Pharaoh realized, hold on a minute, if everyone's really aligned, living their true purpose, and they're all happy, no one's going to listen to me. So he couldn't have the propaganda because everyone's like, hold on a minute, that doesn't sound right. I'm not going to do that. So he destroyed the temples and then really brought this masculine energy back into trade, whereas before it was the masculine and feminine were really balanced at the beginning. And I think I see a shift now of coming back to that balance, that we know it's not like having a world that's male or female dominated, but the two have to work really well together. And when you get that balance, I think that changes everything. And I think when you understand your true value, because we all have the two energies within us, then you start to feel that balance, you start to feel that alignment, and everything starts to work. And these amazing opportunities come to you. You feel more in alignment with what you're doing, and suddenly your contribution grows and you can see how you can have more impact in the world. So, coming back to your statement, I think if everyone was living in their true purpose and believed in themselves, then absolutely we'd all have a very different experience of the world, I think.
Yeah, because people would be living in flow. They would, and you used the word alignment and you said living into their value. And it's so true. I don't know, and I'd love for you to speak on this. I don't know what it's like in Europe and where you are, but in the States, one of the things that we experience a lot here, you talked about burnout, is of course burnout. And a lot of burnout happens because people are not living in alignment. They're living the dual life. They're living the life at work and doing what they have to do at work in order to keep their job. And then they go home and they want to be this different person. And of course, it's going to lead to burnout. They're exhausted. They're living one life and then they're trying to live another. And what I've learned with myself is that by living in alignment of like, these are my values, and they're my values that I carry not just at work, but also at home, and vice versa. They're my values at home that I also carry at work. It's made work so much easier. I mean, it's right now, you hear it from me on my podcast right now as we're speaking, is that this is me. I don't have to fake who I am for my podcast, for my show, and be this host and be this interviewer. I'm just curious, right? I just want to have a platform to be able to speak and meet new people on. And that's part of me living in my purpose. And, that's exactly it, is that, the more people can do that, the less burnout we'll see here as in the States. And so I'm curious, is that something that you hear over where you are, of people saying, oh, I live a dual life, or, I just want to find work-life balance? Work-life balance is like a huge term that we use here.
Yeah, and this whole work-life balance, I hate that term because you kind of think there's work and then there's life.
Exactly.
It's like, well, no, it's all life.
Right.
How do you create? I think it's all about consciously creating your life in a way that you can, enjoy it. You can feel comfortable. You can feel in alignment. And when you understand your true value, and it becomes much easier to be much more self-compassionate as well. So you create boundaries. You say no to things that you think, well, I can't really see how I can add much value to that. So I've become a master of saying no. And people are always asking, how do you get so much done? Because I live abroad. I don't have a family or a support network that can help with the kids and the dog and the family. My husband travels all the while. So I'm kind of a single parent running this empire. Well,
I love it.
And people, how do you get so much done? It's like, well, I don't. There is so much that I don't do. So much. I don't do guilt. I don't do like any of this. I just focus on, well, this is what I really care about. This is where I have an impact and I love it. And this is my family that I really want to invest time in. And it's kind of a bit of a messy blend sometimes, but it all works. But there's so many other things that I just just don't get involved in, because I can't really add value. I'm just saying yes because I feel it's my duty, or I feel guilty, or I used to, but now I don't. And yeah, it just gives you so much more time and space to know you're doing the right thing, and having that self-compassion and looking after yourself first, knowing that that's then going to enable you to do more good for others. It took a long time to get here. It hasn't been like instant and automatic. But I have a few phrases that I keep reminding myself of, that, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So when I'm frustrated that things aren't coming together, I just know everything will come in its own time. I'm just me. Just take it back a bit, break it down, do it slower, and then it all comes together. I don't burn out, I don't get overwhelmed because I have taken that step back. Or if I'm having a moment where I'm really panicked and stressed, then I'll go take a bath, or I'll go and have a walk or a nap, or meet with friends, do something else. And then when you come back, you see it differently, because suddenly you realize, I don't need to do all of these things. I can just do this one thing and that's enough. Because I think we tend to push ourselves to be perfectionists. We want to do the best. We want to be like good pupils and students that we've been trained to be. But, most of the time, B minus is more than enough. We don't have to keep pursuing A plus plus in everything. And there are some things that, are the gold standard. If you're going to give a TED talk, for example, you want to give that the time to get it right, to practice, to do your best job. But, if you're going to do a podcast interview or a social media live, then yeah, it needs to be decent. But if you have some ums and ahs in there, or if you fluff your words a little bit, it doesn't matter. The value is still there. So I think when we start to categorize what we're doing and say no to a lot more things, then we can stay in and get more out of our day, have more impact with the time we have available. But I think it starts with knowing that true value, so that you can feel confident saying no to all the shiny objects and distractions and things much more easily. Because I say more easily because it's never easy. But yeah, you give yourself much more scope to have fun. Almost I feel guilty sometimes because, I'm so stressed. And you're like, oh, I'm not, not at all. And they're like, well, what? And you always see a look in their face like, why not? But yeah, I think we have much more opportunity to make a difference if we're focusing just in that sort of zone of genius. I think, is it Gay Hendricks that says that? But it's a process as well. It's not something that is instantly obvious. You have to, when I help my clients find their true value, it takes a few weeks and a lot of deep thinking and it's a bit of a tango, because you start to understand your value, start to understand your ideal clients, your niche, and then it's kind of a bit of a tango between the two to find that sort of sweet spot where the two overlap. And if you build everything in that space, then you're going to love it. Your clients are going to be like delighted, and you're going to have a big impact. And then it keeps everything simple too.
Brene Brown, boundaries, right? Boundaries create freedom. It took me a long time to learn that. It took me such a long time to learn that, where I wanted to be this free soul, this free creative thinker, and do what I want, live without a calendar, just go off on my own. And really what that led to was more overwhelm and stress, because you're always thinking about what do you have to do next. You're always wondering, you're always saying yes to things, like you said. Whereas when I use a calendar very rigidly now. When you have a calendar and you look at it and you go, here's what I have time for, here's what I don't have time for, it actually makes it a lot easier to say no to things. Where I look at it, I go, I can't do that. I can't go there. I can't, and I'm using can't as a word of power, in that it's not that I can't do it. I'm choosing not to do these things, right? It's a choice. I'm seeing my calendar. I'm going, I'm prioritizing this event. I'm prioritizing this moment with my family over that other one. And so for me, the calendar is my boundaries. It allows me to see that. And there's so much freedom in there, because to your point, You and I share the similarity. I get the same question. How do you get so much done? And I say, it's not what I do, it's what I don't do. That's what I always tell people. It's what I don't do. The other thing I want to highlight that you said that I loved is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I absolutely love that. I'm a skier. I would assume you're in the Swiss Alps. Come on, please tell me. Please tell me. You ski.
I used to ski until I've damaged my knee. So
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Right? And I mean, you get a good coat of wax on your skis and you make them smooth. It doesn't matter what size ski you have, what quality, what brand ski you have, you are moving. You are moving fast, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, entrepreneurship and life, it's bumpy enough as it is. So yeah, if we can give ourselves a nice smooth run of it, it's much easier.
I think so too. You're also someone who, it's so funny, as the value whisperer, doesn't consider herself a leader, but so many people call on you to be a leader. And I'd love for you to just give your impression, your talk about leadership.
Yeah, I think it comes back to this communication that with my team when I've worked in corporate and now in my business, I never assume that I have all the answers. And I think this comes back to my art education, because when you go to art school, even though I did a management degree, you're always taught there's always a better way. There's always a different way to look at things. There's always a different idea. Take inspiration from everywhere and then, sit with it, see what comes out of that, and then, see what else. At one point we had to make this painting to represent something. Actually, it was a leadership. What does leadership represent to you? And we made this painting, and then we had to rip it up. And then I was like, "What? I really love this painting. Like, rip it up." Like, okay.
Oh my goodness.
And it's like, well, now really represent leadership with the pieces. I was like, oh, okay. So it was always break things down. You can put them together a different way to have a very different impact and see things differently. And I think that has stayed with me throughout my entire career. So I've always been really curious, and I'm more from the point of view of listening to other people and making the connections that people have missed a little bit and taking that forward. So I love listening to my team and seeing what ideas they have, never assuming that I've got the best idea, but say, well, I know I've got my idea. What are yours? And then putting that all together, we always come up with something better and something often that's simpler. Or I'd been thinking about, we have to do all of this complex stuff, and then they come up with something that's really like, if we did this, it's like, yeah, that would fix it. So I really like my team to be more collaborators, but because of that, and I think they are able and they feel comfortable to step in. So when I was pregnant and I felt awful, my team just stepped in and covered everything. And that was a big leadership lesson, because I had been doing like 120% in my business, in my role. And I realized they could have been doing this all the time. I could have been doing 80% and they could have picked up the slack easily, because they had been part of that journey. They had been part of the team we wanted to create. And we discussed, when I mentioned earlier that I went into these meetings with a clear idea, this is what we stand for, this is what's important to us, and we're going to let everything else slide. We discussed that as a team. I'm going into this meeting to represent us. What does that look like? I'm thinking this, but is that what's really important to us? Let's discuss this. And we had like a big sort of powwow around that to all agree, because I needed them to stand up for the same things too. If they were going through a meeting on our behalf, then we needed that coherence and that consistency. So so I don't necessarily feel of that as leadership, but then maybe it is. It works anyway.
It certainly is leadership, because leadership is bringing others in, collaborating, as you said, supporting other people's ideas, but also offering the guardrails. I think leadership is a lot of the guardrails, and you just described that there. You're helping them along the way find their own, right? You're a coach, And in coaching, we know this, right? It's not about us solving the problem for our mentee or the person we're coaching. It's about helping them find the solution. And that's true leadership, right? And that's what you do with your team. And the other cool part, like you said, is when you start delegating, you start realizing, wow, I don't have to do all of this by myself, which is really, really cool when you start delegating, because the more people that you could delegate to, the more you can get done. And the more people that are involved, of course, and I'm not talking about too many chefs in the kitchen, I'm talking about the more people involved at a productive level, and the more input you get at that level, the smarter the ideas. And sometimes you're right. As the leader, as the owner of the organization, we overthink things, we overcomplicate things. And it takes that outsider's perspective to come in and say, hey, what if you just did it this way? And it's so much simpler. And I think, again, it goes back to your leadership qualities for yourself and for everybody listening, is that it takes a true leader to be able to listen to others' insight. It takes a true leader to be able to listen to other people's insight. Let's go back to Toastmasters for a second here. Toastmasters' slogan is "where leaders are made," something along those lines, right? And when you think about one of the most valuable part of a Toastmasters meeting, isn't it the feedback?
Yeah, the evaluation, it's always brilliant. And as I said, before I even spoke, I learned so much from those evaluations alone. And it wasn't even on my talk. So you're learning about, oh, this is good, this is bad, or do I agree? So yeah, you learn a lot. And the nice thing about the way I brought my team in to help us define, well, what do we represent? What do we stand for? What's important to us? Was that when I had performance reviews, I wasn't the one that said, you were good at this, you were bad at that. I just asked them, where do you think you've been performing given what we're trying to achieve here? And they were always so tough on themselves. Like, oh, well, I'm really bad at this and I could have done that so much better. I was like, oh, actually, I thought you were really good. So it gave me a nice opportunity to be the good guy.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting how to do that approach and understand how they see themselves and what's important to them, because it's all the perspective is always a little bit different. But it gave me a nice sort of coaching moment with them as well, to be a mentor and help them see like where they can yeah, I agree, this could be better. What do you need to get there? And so is really good at that. Should I set up a meeting and you can go and speak to this person and really help see what's going to help them get to their goals and understand their motivations, what's important to them, where they want to go. So it was fun. I kind of miss it.
And that's exactly what leaders do, right? Leaders support others. Leaders help others accomplish their goals. That's a true sign of a leader, is helping somebody else accomplish their own goals. So certainly a leader. Another thing that I got to bring up here, which is, you live a life of irony, which is, you are introverted, you're shy, yet you wrote a book, you're a master networker, you're on stages, you're a TEDx coach, and then you're also a podcast host. And so you have the Driven Female Entrepreneur podcast. I'd love if you could share a little bit about that with our audience.
Yeah. As I said, speaking is my way of maintaining my bit of courage, because otherwise I'll just shrink back and disappear for sure. And I would just maybe post on LinkedIn once in a while.
Yeah, the muscle will atrophy otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. So podcasting was the way that I could make sure that every single week I'm showing up and I'm adding value. And I started with the Driven Female Entrepreneur podcast. And my motivation for that was that I just saw so many women, and I think men fall into this as well, but my network is mostly women. I just saw them thinking, oh, I'm really struggling with this, but everyone else finds it easy. I'm a failure. Like, no one finds this stuff easy. No one builds their business in 6 months and is making six figures, very few. They just didn't see the reality because they didn't have a network. And what seemed interesting, and maybe from your perspective, you have a different view, but all the women that I know that started a business, and I think I've interviewed more than 150 women on the show now. Out of all of those women I interviewed, plus my clients and network, one one woman intended to start a business. For everyone else, it was a life event. They had some health thing. Their parents got sick. They moved country. They had kids, and they couldn't go back to the corporate environment, so they started a business. But because they hadn't intended to, they hadn't really planned, they hadn't got the research, they didn't have the network. So they were starting a business, which is already hard enough, but they were isolated. They didn't have access to the support and the networks and the knowledge that they needed, which was then they would turn into the internet and just seeing successful people and therefore thinking, oh, I'm not successful in 6 months, therefore I'm no good at this. So I wanted to take the opportunity to draw the curtain back and show people what a real journey looks like. So that's always the first question I was asking these women. I was like, well, how did you get started? What was that like versus reality? And yeah, tell us how that's been. And I never interviewed someone that's been in business for less than 5 years because I wanted to have that kind of perspective. And it was so interesting, and it gave women so much more courage. And they were like, oh, I'm not missing anything. I just need to keep going. I just need to. And so I was being a sort of pocket mentor, if you like. But now the show yesterday transitioned. So now from this year, it's going to be the Art of Value Whispering podcast, because it's time to step up and share more of my perspective. My audience were reaching out and asking for that. My solo episodes, I saw, got a lot more listeners than my interviews. So
wow.
I was taking that as like, okay, yeah, people want to hear more from me. So, and although everything I've done so far on the show I've loved, and it really has had an impact, and there's business schools are using it as an example of female leadership and entrepreneurship in practice, which I was really proud of. But now I want to take people on a journey. So rather than just having these interviews with lots of different people, I want to take people step by step through finding their value, believing in themselves, finding their niche. So many people go around in circles about their niche because they're thinking about it wrong, I believe. So I want to sort of set the record straight in a lot of things. And as I was saying, my expertise is all about communication and connection, and people aren't being taught this ever. And then they start a business, and most of your business success comes from your ability to communicate. And so I really want to start sharing more of my expertise in this and bring in people on, guests, men and women, who are living into that, who are thinking a bit differently about the way that they embrace their value and weave that through their business to make an impact. So I'm really excited for where it's going to go. I'm hoping it's a wise move and not completely foolish to leave behind everything we've built there. I mean, the podcast I've renamed it because I want those episodes to still be there and accessible. But yeah, I'm excited.
That's really, really cool. I commend you for that switch there that you're doing, because I believe it's very heavy lifting. I mean, at least from my perspective, I really enjoy the interview style because I feel it's kind of a nice tennis match of a back and forth. And also the heavy lifting for me is not much, because all I have to do is really just listen and ask you follow-up questions while you share, right? But when you're speaking by yourself, which I've attempted to do a podcast by myself on more than one occasion, it's a lot of heavy lifting because it's just you. And you have to have the content and know the content really, really well to be able to speak on it for 15 minutes, half an hour on a weekly basis. As you said, you put your podcast out. So it's a lot of heavy lifting. It sounds like what's cool for you, though, which is also important for everybody here, is you have, one, a great network, and two, a great support system from your following. And I think that when you can feed off of your followers and their questions, their comments, their concerns, their ideas, it helps you as the individual to be able to go on and speak on some of those topics. So it kind of will guide the way for you. And you're already saying that because that's why you're doing it, is because they're kind of guiding you towards this.
Yeah, exactly. So I've spoken a lot about this, and so I have my kind of set presentation that I give, but then the questions people ask, and really understanding why people get in such a pickle over their marketing, for example. And recently there was one lady in a talk, and she was like, "But how is it possible to be consistent? How can I post on social media every single day? And like, well, I don't think that's what consistency means. I think consistency means consistency of your message, of the way you make people feel about the impact you have. So, hands on, if I put my hands up, I'm not consistent on social media. So there's some weeks I'm there every single day, and others where I forget completely. I'm like, oh no, I haven't posted anything for a couple of weeks. So, I'm not consistent, but I've been to events in all across Europe and like towns quite far from here, and people almost always, I can't remember an event when this hasn't happened, come up to me and thank me for my content,
Mm.
even though I haven't been consistent. But because that consistency of message, the value, the impact it's having on people is there, then people remember it because they can take it away and do something. It made them feel a different way or gave them permission to think differently. So that's what gets remembered.
Mm.
So it was really interesting. So I thought, yeah, that could be already a great podcast because it's not something that people talk about. There's a lot of people talking about social media and posting every day. And at the same time, I was like, I don't know, who is it that's watching their clock thinking they should have posted by now?
Right, right.
Not me. So I think this idea of consistency and how people show up, and there's a lot of pressure being put on people unnecessarily, I think. As I say, I've built my business part-time on my own around this, my growing family in a country where I don't really speak the language or understand what's going on half the time. Um, but it's that consistency of message and all of the kind of simplicity I've brought into my business that have helped me with that. And I think when it comes to marketing, people think they need to do more. They need to add in things rather than marketing being what you do anyway. It's just how you do things is your marketing. You are your marketing. You
Yeah.
are your lead magnet. And so I think there's some mindset shifts that can help people already feel a lot more relaxed about their marketing and how they connect and bring people into their business. And yeah, I'm excited to share it.
I think that that's so cool. And I mean, right on topic with your quote that you love from Richard Branson, which is, if it's no longer fun, stop doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with what you just said there is that if your marketing isn't fun, if your social media posts aren't fun, then stop doing it. I love that.
Yeah, and more to the point, if your marketing isn't fun, you'll automatically stop doing it anyway, but not in a way of thinking, oh, let me do something different. You just, if you don't enjoy what you do, you don't do it. So it has to come from the heart, I think. And I heard an old mentor of mine told me that people do two things in life. They do what they love and they do what they're being watched on. And the challenge for us as business owners or leaders, no one's watching. You have to make yourself do these things. And so if you don't love it, you don't do it. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to get yourself a coach or someone to be hold you accountable. But yeah, it's hard. But if you love what you do, if you're in your zone of genius, you're living your value, suddenly everything just becomes so much easier
I think that that's
and more fun.
amazing. I think that that's amazing. It's been really a pleasure getting to know you and having you on the show today. I feel like I need to have you on more often because you have so many great, valuable insights to offer. Where can people learn about your podcast that you have launched and are rebranding?
So my podcast, it's on all the platforms. So if you search Melita Campbell or The Art of Value Whispering or even The Driven Female Entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure that will still get picked up. You'll find it. Or if you go to my website, melittacampbell.com, then you can click through on the button that says podcast.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, it's been really wonderful having you on. I'm going to have you on my Toastmasters. You have an open invite to come to my Toastmasters. You and I will network a little bit about that after the call here today. I'd like to offer you just an opportunity to share anything else that you would like that maybe I didn't ask in this podcast so far.
Gosh, I think we have covered so much. I don't think there's
Yes.
anything additional, but I would like to encourage people to just try and keep things simple. Really understand what's important to you and give yourself permission to lean into that and not feel duty bound to do anything else. Because when we make our highest contribution, it feels great. And we benefit the world, as you were saying. So yeah, keep things simple and give yourself permission to do things the way that feels right for you. I think if we lean into that, that already gives us a lot of clues as to where we should best be working.
Awesome. Awesome. And then just again, for our audio listeners, where can they find your book? Where can they find you? How can they book a call with you?
So through my website is the easiest, melittacampbell.com. You'll find me on every social media platform. And my book is likewise in any bookstore, a real bookstore. You can order it if they don't have it on the shelves. And it's on Amazon and Waterstones and all the online places as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And thank you so much for your patience in getting on the show. I know it's been a long time coming. So I am so excited that we finally got to connect and have you on today. This has been a wonderful, wonderful show with you. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.